Autumn in Vermont didn't announce itself loudly. It arrived like a whisper, through crisp air, the soft scent of wood smoke, and a golden hue that wrapped the world in quiet comfort. Apple trees stood in neat rows, their branches heavy with fruit, while amber leaves tumbled lazily across gravel paths. It was the kind of place where time didn't rush, it wandered. A rusty old pickup rolled to a stop at the edge of Rowan Orchard, just past a crooked wooden sign that read, 1892 Rowan Family Cider. Lena Hart stepped out with a worn canvas bag, her boots crunching against scattered leaves. She paused for a moment, taking it all in, the farmhouse with its peeling white trim, the distant whistle of wind through the trees, the smell of apples just beginning to ripen. Something in her chest loosened. She had left Boston behind. The apartment, the job at the boutique flower shop, the memories, especially the ones that had clung too tightly, the ones that made it hard to breathe. Coming here wasn't part of a grand plan. It was a retreat, a place her great-aunt Nora had always spoken of with affection. "Come if you ever need to remember how to breathe," she once told her. So, Lena did. The front door opened with a soft creak, and Nora appeared, bundled in a knit cardigan, her smile wide and warm. She opened her arms like a lighthouse welcoming a lost ship. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she said. Lena stepped forward, into the embrace, and for the first time in what felt like forever, her shoulders dropped. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle into her bones. Behind her, apple leaves rustled gently in the breeze. It wasn't much. But maybe, just maybe, it was enough to start again. From the second-story window of the old farmhouse, behind glass smudged with time and autumn dust, Micah Rowan watched her. He wasn't the kind of man who stared. Life had taught him how to look away. But something in the way she stood there, suitcase in hand, eyes scanning the orchard like they were searching for something lost, made him pause. He hadn't meant to notice, and yet he couldn't help it. Micah had once been as rooted to this land as the apple trees themselves. A third-generation cider maker, raised among barrels, harvests, and the scent of pressed fruit. He'd grown up running barefoot through these same rows Lena now stood beside. But all of that felt like another lifetime. 3 years ago, he lost his wife and both parents in a boating accident on Lake Champlain, a freak storm, no goodbyes, just a phone call that never came. Since then, he had withdrawn from everything, friends, interviews, the family's annual cider showcase. He let the world turn without him. Except for harvest. Every autumn, he returned quietly to oversee the work. No one questioned his silence anymore. They were used to the shadow he had become. But today something stirred. A new presence. The way the stranger's laugh lifted on the breeze. The way she tilted her head when she looked at the trees, as if she was listening to their stories. Micah didn't believe in omens, but he knew this much. Sometimes, the orchard whispered back. Their first meeting wasn't planned. It wasn't even a conversation. Lena had been wandering the back barn, a place she'd been told once housed barrels of cider but now served as makeshift storage and an overgrown library. Dust danced in slants of morning sun as she reached for a book on apple cultivation. Just as her fingers touched the spine, a shadow crossed behind her. She turned. Micah stood there, one hand tucked into his jacket pocket, the other holding a notepad. His eyes briefly met hers, unreadable, then drifted to the shelves. "You'll want the newer edition," he said, voice low, almost careful. "Oh," she replied, startled. "Thank you." He gave a short nod and walked past her, silent as the wind, between rows of trees. That was the first. The second came days later. Lena was watering pots of mums on the front porch when Micah passed by, heading toward the cider shed. He paused, not long enough for it to count as lingering, but not quite fast enough to be accidental either. "Do you like chamomile?" he asked, nodding toward the tea mug in her hand. She blinked, surprised he'd noticed. "It helps me think," she said. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes softened. Good choice. Then he kept walking. It wasn't much, but it was something. From then on, these quiet moments began to appear, like soft echoes in the orchard wind. A folded note left beside the ledger in the barn, "Be careful, bees near the third row." A steaming cup of tea on the porch swing that Nora swore she didn't make. The occasional glance held just a second too long. Micah never said much, but Lena was learning to listen in other ways. And maybe, just maybe, he was learning too. It had rained the night before. Not a storm, just a slow, cold drizzle that soaked through the soil and clung to the morning air like mist. Lena had stayed out too long, arranging wildflower bundles on the orchard's stone wall, her fingers growing numb, her cheeks pink from the chill. By sunrise, the fever had arrived. She insisted she was fine, just tired, just cold, but Aunt Nora didn't believe her and promptly tucked her into the guest bed with extra quilts. A stern, "Rest, you have nothing to prove here." The world drifted in and out, light shifting behind curtains, the muffled hum of wind, distant creaks from the old wooden beams. Lena wasn't sure how long she slept, or when exactly she woke to find Micah Rowan sitting beside her bed, quietly holding a damp cloth. Her breath caught. "You're burning up," he said softly, like the words were foreign on his tongue. "Nora had to run to town. I thought I'd stay a while." She tried to sit up. He gently guided her back with a touch, so careful it almost didn't register. Then he adjusted the pillow, placed a warm mug in her hands. Ginger and honey. Her favorite, though she'd never told him that. They didn't speak. There was only the crackle of distant firewood and the soft sound of her breathing, uneven and surprised. When she reached for the cup again, her fingers brushed against his. Neither of them moved. 1 second, just one heartbeat, but it shifted something. Their eyes met. Close. Too close. For the first time, Micah's guarded gaze faltered. There was something open there, something unspoken and scared and real. He leaned in, only slightly, like drawn by gravity. Then he pulled back. "You should sleep," he said, standing abruptly. His voice had gone low again, clipped. "I'll check in later." And just like that, he was gone. But Lena didn't sleep. She lay still, cup resting in her hands, heart pounding against her ribs. Not from the fever, from something else entirely. The afternoon sun poured over the orchard like liquid amber, casting soft shadows between the trees as Lena moved through the far rows with Josh, the new intern. He was younger, always smiling, always eager to help. That day he had offered to show her how to check for ripeness, gently lifting apples in his palm, pointing out which ones were ready for harvest. It was nothing more than kindness, harmless conversation, laughter that came easy after days of quiet. But sometimes, even ease can be mistaken for intimacy. A low branch caught in Lena's hair. "Wait," Josh said, reaching out. "You've got a twig stuck." His hand brushed lightly against her temple as he freed the strand, and she laughed, brushing it off with a shy smile. And that's when Micah saw them. He hadn't meant to watch, but he did. From the curve of the row, he stopped mid-step. The sound of her laughter, the closeness between them, the way Josh leaned in, it all struck him with a sharpness he didn't expect. A feeling rose from his chest, unfamiliar but unmistakable. Jealousy. He stepped forward, voice cutting through the trees like a cold wind. "Josh," he called, steady but clipped. "I believe the fermentation tanks still need inspecting." Josh straightened, caught off guard. "Yes, sir, I'm sure Miss Hart can manage on her own." There was no room in that tone for explanation. Josh gave Lena a quick, uncomfortable smile, then hurried off without another word. Silence followed, thick as sap. Lena turned to Micah slowly. "Did I do something wrong?" He didn't meet her eyes. Distracting workers isn't exactly helpful. His words weren't loud, but they were sharp, precise, in the way they could cut without shouting. Lena's voice dropped, colder now. "We weren't doing anything wrong. He was helping me. That's all." Micah looked at her, then away. "He seemed very helpful." She blinked. Hurt flared in her chest. "You don't get to decide what that meant." He said nothing. She took a breath, steady but shaking. "I came here to heal, not to be a target for whatever it is you're fighting with inside yourself." And then she turned and walked away, her steps sure, shoulders set, leaving Micah standing alone between the rows of trees that had once been home, but now only echoed with everything he hadn't said. After that confrontation, Micah disappeared. He didn't show up at dinner. His footsteps no longer echoed on the porch. The silent presence that used to stir something in her now vanished completely, leaving behind a strange emptiness, part relief, part ache. The days that followed turned colder. The orchard fell quiet. There were no wildflowers to arrange, no conversations to replay, just stillness, stretched out like an unspoken wound. That morning, Lena pulled out the old hand-drawn map Nora had given her when she first arrived, a shaky line sketched with care leading to a hidden waterfall beyond the western woods. She didn't know exactly why she followed it, only that she needed a place where her chest could rise again, where she could breathe. When she reached it, she froze. The waterfall poured gently down a moss-covered rock wall, its mist catching slivers of sunlight as they streamed through the canopy. The pool below rippled like it was alive. Lena took off her shoes and dipped her feet in. She didn't cry, but something deep inside her cracked wide open. A sound behind her made her turn. Micah. He stood a few feet away, holding a worn leather notebook. Both of them looked surprised. Neither had expected to see the other here. "I wasn't following you," he said softly, his voice clumsy, unsure. "I know," Lena replied. He sat on a nearby stone, just far enough to respect the distance. The sound of falling water filled the silence between them. After a long moment, he spoke. "I'm sorry. For that day. For how I made you feel." Lena didn't answer, but her eyes asked what her lips couldn't. "Why do you pull me close, only to push me away?" Micah looked down at his hands. "Because I'm scared that if I love again, I'll lose again." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was never something to be afraid of." He looked up, and for the first time his gaze was unguarded. Micah reached out, gently tucking a curl behind her ear. The gesture was soft, weightless. Then he leaned in, slowly, carefully, as if waiting for her permission. She didn't pull away. Their kiss came quiet, like a breath held too long. Not fiery, not rushed, just tender. Two hearts that had once broken, now finding their way back to warmth. When they parted, his forehead rested lightly against hers. "I need time," he whispered. Then he rose without another word, walking back into the forest, leaving Lena with a heart that trembled. After the afternoon by the waterfall, Lena didn't see Micah again. No message. No knock on the door. No quiet cup of tea left waiting on the porch. The house itself seemed to shrink, falling into a silence so deep even the wind brushing the windows felt too loud. She waited. One day, then two, and then she knew he wasn't coming. Not because he didn't care, but because he was still trapped in a fear she couldn't reach, couldn't fix. That afternoon, as the sunlight stretched long over the orchard, Lena packed a few clothes, an old notebook, the thin scarf from Boston, and the apple blossom perfume Aunt Nora had given her. She didn't need much, just enough to leave gently. "You're really leaving?" Nora asked, her eyes lowered, voice trembling slightly. Lena nodded. "I've stayed long enough to know when I'm no longer needed." Nora didn't try to stop her. She simply pulled Lena into a long, quiet hug, the kind that said, "Sometimes, love means letting someone go." Just as Lena pulled her suitcase from the front porch, the golden light of late afternoon poured through the apple trees, painting the gravel path in soft amber. The wheels clicked softly over the stones, each sound echoing like a heartbeat she was trying to quiet. She hadn't made it far when the sound came, familiar, urgent. A car, then a door slammed shut. Micah. He stepped out, hair tousled from wind, shirt wrinkled from the long drive. His eyes scanned the house like someone racing time itself. As he reached the porch, Nora appeared, her face heavy with emotion. "She's gone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Micah froze. "How long ago?" Nora looked at him, her eyes wet. "Not even 5 minutes." He didn't speak, he just ran. Through the orchard, past wild grasses and worn paths, under the same trees that had witnessed too much silence, until, finally, he saw her. Lena stood at the roadside bus stop. The wind teased the scarf around her neck. She didn't hear him approach. Didn't know that this time, he hadn't come to disappear. "Lena," his voice cracked, raw with something deeper than breath. She stopped. Her hand still gripped the suitcase handle. "Please, don't go," he said, breathing hard. She turned, her eyes a mix of fear and fragile hope. Micah stepped forward, facing her, nothing left to hide. 3 years ago, my wife died. It was sudden. She called me before she boarded the boat, said, "I love you." I didn't say it back, and since then, I thought if I never loved again, I'd never lose again. His voice trembled. Then you came, and every day, you reminded me that living isn't the same as being alive. You scared me, because you made me want to live again. Lena stood still, tears falling silently. Micah touched her cheek, his hand gentle, his eyes pleading. "I love you, and this time, I don't want to miss the chance." Neither of them remembered who reached out first. All they knew was that when Lena fell into Micah's arms, everything that had stood between them, the silence, the fear, the unspoken things, melted like morning fog in sunlight. He held her tightly, as if letting go meant she might vanish all over again. Lena didn't cry anymore, but her heart beat so loud she could hear it in her ears. She was alive. She could still love. There were no words like "come home," no questions like "what happens now?" Because as they walked back together, hand in hand, under the fading light and rows of still apple trees, they already knew. They had chosen each other, not with promises, but with footsteps. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the kitchen window, casting a warm golden streak across the old wooden floor. Lena stood there, barefoot, gently pouring tea into a white porcelain cup. The scent of apple and cinnamon drifted through the air, mingling with the quiet hum of Aunt Nora baking. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Micah entered, silent, but the look in his eyes was no longer the look of someone running. It was the look of someone who had finally come home. Neither of them mentioned last night. They didn't have to. Because the most important things are rarely said aloud. Every step they took through the orchard, every silent touch as a cup passed from hand to hand, every glance that lingered just a little longer, these were the ways they chose to begin again. No grand promises, no sweeping declarations. Just two people who had once fallen apart, now quietly learning to live again. Slowly, gently, together. A month later, on a golden afternoon, Micah asked Lena to come with him into the orchard. She didn't ask where. She simply laced her fingers through his, and together they walked beneath the ripening trees. Sunlight spilled like honey across the apples. The air was sweet with fallen leaves and the distant scent of cider fermenting in the barn. Each step on the soft ground led them back to where it all began. Not in heartbreak, but in quiet presence. In a clearing between two long rows, Micah stopped. There, waiting, was a small wooden table. On it, 2 glasses of hand-pressed cider and a bouquet of wild chamomile, the same flower Lena had once told him she loved in their very first conversation. She smiled, soft, surprised, and certain. Micah turned toward her, then slowly dropped to one knee. He didn't make a speech, just one question fuller than any promise. "Will you stay until the final harvest?" Lena didn't cry, but her voice caught gently as she whispered, "I already have." As Micah gently opened his hand to reveal a simple ring, the sun tilted low beyond the hills. He didn't place it on her finger just yet. He waited, and when she nodded again, with a smile that held both tears and trust, she extended her hand and he slid the ring into place. And just like that, in the quiet orchard where the wind stirred through trees, they didn't just make a promise. They began something real. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, it was a beginning, rooted, quiet, and deeply alive.